So the Sleaze scandal still rumbles on, and I don't think this is going to end anytime soon, if you ask me. Um, I well and truly think that this has become a massive problem for Boris Johnson. And one of the surprising things I often hear a lot of people say is, you know, they think that Boris Johnson is really powerful, and that, oh, the Tories can do all this, and you know, we're worried about what they're going to do. But in reality, while Boris looks strong, that couldn't even be further from the truth. And remember, Boris himself is partially to blame for his own unstable situation that he is in now. Boris Johnson has a massive conservative majority, but he acts as if he's a prime minister who has a majority far, far slimmer. And that is because in reality, the Conservative Party is split among numerous fault lines, and we've discussed this before. The massive difference between the MPs who support global Britain and those who support levelling up, and we've discussed at length before how those two agendas cannot exist at the same time, because if you go for the levelling up campaign, that completely undermines the global Britain agenda. But if you go for the global Britain agenda, that completely undermines the levelling up one. And we are seeing that at the moment, obviously, the Tories favouring that, even trying to tie in the levelling up message to the global Britain one. But again, it's not taking. We've got the multiple parties at odds with each other of the Northern Research Group, the cultural. Well, we've got the COVID recovery group. We've got the ERG still there. There are the hardcore Brexiteers, the Brexit Spartan group, they call themselves. So on the surface, it looks like the Conservative Party is a good, strong party, but that couldn't be further from the truth. And this Sleaze scandal is going to expose even more huge fault lines within the party. So before we do jump into the today's article on this, let's have a, well, if you would be so kind, shall we say, to have a click of the like button, the share button, and of course the subscribe button if you are new. And of course down below there are links to my Patreon page and a one-off donation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can, well, buy me coffee, and I think I certainly need one today. So anyway, let's jump into this article. This article today, then. This comes from The Independent, and the title is Boris Johnson's anti-sleaze plan is purely for show. He knows it will not pass. Under Theresa May and Boris Johnson, the Conservative Party has become increasingly ungovernable. The process shows no sign of stopping, and it will continue into the next parliament, especially if Johnson wins a smaller majority. Let me be clear. This isn't me speaking. It is the view of a number of certain and former Conservative MPs with very different standpoints, who I have been talking to in the recent days and weeks. The events of the last 2 weeks are a demonstration of this process at work. And in the pre-Brexit past, the Tories' internal cohesion was led from Downing Street, enforced by the whips, and backed up by the backbench 1922 committee and its officers, who were essentially a parliamentary arm of the government. Discipline was one of the party's most intimidating parliamentary assets. But today, almost the reverse is now true. Tory discipline still exists, sometimes very formidably and effectively. But it exists in little groups of like-minded MPs, not across the whole of the party. Brexit has highlighted that in reality. But the reality continued after Britain finally left the EU in January of 2020. Revolts among MPs are almost now a weekly occurrence. Johnson proposals to clamp down on the MPs' earnings outside of jobs has proved a powerful example of this. The clampdown was prompted this week as though it would be as though it would wrong-foot Labour, and perhaps even try to recapture a bit of what remains of the moral high ground after the Owen Paterson debacle. But that is not how it was actually seen by Tory MPs, or probably even Johnson himself. it was very highly unlikely it will get anywhere anytime soon. The proposal was performative. The reforms will not happen because it will not even be believed in the policy. Johnson would not really expect his party to deliver it. Many things that make the modern Conservative Party unusually different to manage is the large parliamentary majority. That means a lot of thwarted ambition on the backbenchers. But there is also a lot of backbench group pluses. All of which are divided by various forms of ideology, habit, culture, and self interest, a development enhanced by the success of the 2019 election in the old industrial North and by Johnson's very own unpredictability. One of those groups, based around, is the so called Spartans, who brought down May and triggered the ill judged attempt to try and get Patterson off the hook for breaking lobbying rules. This wasn't really a government matter at all in the old sense, but it was one in a new group scale sense. It was a complete disaster. But despite the Prime Minister's U turn over Patterson, these groups still hold the true power. One of the key factors is to try and grasp around the past fortnight is that second jobs are much more common among Conservative backbenchers than the opposition ones, partly because that is the Tories party's tradition, partly because they are the governing party. Either way, Johnson's clampdown would have hit his own party worse than any other. Tory MPs will have felt it in their wallets. It would have been especially threatening to backbenchers with long careers in safe seats and of those who no longer expect to become ministers. This is why, under the current ungovernability, it was never going to happen. Johnson's proposal is based on a 2018 report by the Independent Committee on Standards in Public Life. It would ban paid work as a parliamentary advisor or consultant and would insist that outside work be confined within reasonable limits. In short, it would threaten the way of a very significant proportion of the Tories now organise their lives, which is partly why it has been gathering dust so far. Oh, yeah, that's me. There is also a minefield of mischiefs in the report's recommendations. So, can an MP who sits on a board be defined as a parliamentary advisor? If not, that could be a loophole. And what are the reasonable limits? It makes a lot of difference if they are defined by the income obtained or, as if the government hopes, by the extracurricular hours spent. Crucially, who decides the meaning of reasonable? The answer cannot realistically be the Prime Minister. The committee says it should be the Parliamentary Commissioner for Standards, Catherine Stone. Yet she is a complete anathema to many Conservatives, including Johnson. Tory MPs hate those plans, and they tend to try and get what they want. The clear indifference is that number 10 does not expect serious reforms, which proposes a cross-party approach and agreement. They are both unlikely to even see the light of day. But many Tory MPs, the damage has already been done. For them, it's just simply another sign that Johnson is a bad leader who does not bother even to consult them and is not good at delivering and whose credibility is on the slide. This tension and, of course, the government ineffectiveness, that humicability goes with it. It is not confined to the sleaze and standards rows. This is part of a whole new major policy choices that Johnson and his party now face. These range from the net zero carbon emissions through a series of key public spending decisions to this week's much trailered and announced but high-profile speed rail. All of these and the gulf between the promises made and, of course, the evolving reality is enormous. Post-lockdown COVID policy is a powerful example too. With England as a distinct from the rest parts of the UK, where Johnson's writ does not run on health issues, essentially junking the restrictions and regulations while allowing COVID cases to rise and the pressure on the health service to increase, the policy makes very little sense, and this was not even supported by the majority of the public. It is in force because the issue is essentially a hostage to the travel and entertainment industry interest, that ultimately to the libertarian groupings on the Tory backbenches. The Prime Minister's personal popularity may have papered over the divides, failures, and contradictions in now the way that he governs. And in a startling chapter about the 2019 voters in the newly published Newfield study, it is made clear that Johnson's attractiveness was most the influential factor behind former Labour voters switching over to Conservatives, far greater than either Brexit or the dislike of Jeremy Corbyn. The question today is, how far is that still true? Johnson's ratings have fallen sharply, yet his position remains secure. Tory MPs don't like his methods or his ideas, but they like his popularity. When he eventually ceases to be the party leader, however, it is highly likely that the strange and unstable coalition over which he presides will become even less manageable than it is today. In those circumstances, the voters may look at the party very differently too. So, in a way, here you can see that Johnson has set the Conservative Party up for a colossal fall. And it is ultimately the responsible of these hardcore Brexiteers. They were the ones who started it. And now the Conservative Party is split into these different groups and different ideologies. There is no longer a uniting factor behind them. And if that is the case, how should voters going forward at future elections manage that? And like I say, I agree. Johnson's popularity is the wallpaper over these colossal gaps and cracks that are the current Conservative Party. You know, it's the wrapping paper. But the second, Boris is gone, and I think this has taken a very massive blow. I think there are now a lot of MPs looking at, well, if Boris goes, who replaces him? And of course, that is going to start massive factional infighting and warfare, because these different factions are going to want their candidates putting forward. That is going to upset the apple cart massively going forward. So the future of the Conservative Party, once Boris is gone, could be incredibly difficult for whoever decides to or gets put up for that challenge, even if it's someone like Rishi Sunak or even Liz Truss. Liz Truss, who is incredibly popular among Conservative voters. Even if she gets put in, can Liz Truss be, the new wallpapering to paper over these cracks? Is she strong enough to, is basically her popularity popular enough to cover over these cracks? I don't think she is, compared to the wider public, compared to her popularity within the Tory party. And when that happens, we are going to see an almighty battle take place. It is going to be civil war within this Conservative Party on a massive scale that we haven't seen for years. But as always, thank you very much for watching. And of course, please remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page and a one-off link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can, buy me coffee. And as always, thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you all next.